WONDERLAND by Jess the Enthusiast. Chapter 1. Falling into Wonderland. I threw my magazine down on the seat next to me, with perhaps more force than necessary. After being on the train for a few hours, I had already read through it about 40 times and was getting bored and frustrated with rereading the same nonsense articles. Curse this long train ride and my amazing speed reading skills. I looked around my train compartment, searching for something to amuse me or at least to stare at, and instead caught the eye of a little old lady sitting opposite me. She really was little, and coming from me, that's saying something. Standing at 5 feet, I am an honorary member of the Fun Size Club, and this lady may as well have been the president. She was cute, though, in her little flower-patterned dress and glasses too big for her elfish face. I smiled at her, and she grinned back, offering me a piece of chocolate from her purse. I gladly accepted, completely ignoring my mother's warning to the 5-year-old me about taking candy from strangers. But I'm pretty sure that excluded sweets from a nice old lady. I nearly choked at the image of her trying to abduct me, with her little scrawny arms and legs. That would be a sight I'd pay to see. We remained pretty quiet after that, making small talk here and there. I told her about how I was returning from boarding school for the summer, how I hadn't seen my family since Christmas time. She was visiting her granddaughter who had recently had a baby boy, and upon my request very proudly showed me a photo of her great-grandson. He was adorable. Not too long after that, the train came to a halt. I quickly collected my things and made my way to the compartment exit. "It was very nice talking to you," I told the woman. She smiled. "And you, dearie. Enjoy your summer." I thanked her and made my way off the train and onto the platform. I tried to ignore the pain in my slowly awakening legs, while I looked around for my father, who was supposed to pick me up and take me back to his flat. My parents had divorced when I was 7, so 10 years later, I was very much used to being passed back and forth between my mum and dad like a game of hot potato. I spun around in circles like an idiot for about 10 minutes trying to spot him in the sea of people, but found no luck. But I suppose I looked less stupid doing that than when I was jumping up and down trying to see over the heads that towered over me. I took my phone out of my duffel bag and angrily dialed his number, tapping my foot as I anxiously waited for him to answer. Clearly, I had yet to master the art of patience in my 17 years. On the 5th ring, he finally picked up. "Hello? Who's this?" I rolled my eyes and let out a heavy sigh. Not a good sign. He bloody damn well knew who it was. He had caller ID. This could only mean one thing. "You forgot, didn't you?" "Oh, hey, pumpkin, how's it going?" Avoiding the subject. Also not good. "You forgot that you had to pick me up, didn't you?" A pause. "No, I didn't." Typical. Absolutely typical. "Yeah, you did." "No, I didn't." "Yeah, you did." "No, I didn't." Okay, for argument's sake, let's just say that you didn't forget. I could feel my face getting hot with anger. Why am I always taking on the parental role between the two of us? Maybe that's why my mum divorced him. Being married to a 12-year-old must be exhausting. "Do you at least have any idea as to when you're going to be here?" He sighed. "I'm not sure, love. I have a lot of work I need to catch up on since I accidentally slept in this morning. I'm sorry." Although I was really mad at him, in his defense, he really did sound sorry. "Sit tight until I get there?" I let out a heavy sigh. "Fine," I mumbled. "See you soon." I hung up and shoved my phone back into my bag. This wasn't the first time he had stranded me until further notice. The universe clearly hated me. I'd probably be dead by the time he finally decided to grow up. I realised it would probably save me a lot of grief if my mum just picked me up, but whenever I came home my dad volunteered to do the job. And I didn't want to tell on him every time he forgot or was ungodly late. It was one of my biggest fears that my mum would use it against him when they argued, which was pretty frequently. I didn't need to give her another reason to think that he was an unfit parent. Accepting that I was going to be there for a while, I manoeuvred myself away from the traffic of people and headed straight for the wall that was in between platforms 9 and 10. Placing my trunk and bag on the ground next to me, I folded my arms and leaned against the wall, immediately regretting it. When my back made contact with the wall, it was as if it hadn't at all. I kept falling backwards, literally through the wall, disappearing into the bricks. It happened so fast that I almost didn't have time to comprehend it. There was no way to stop it. When I landed flat on my arse, my first thought was that I had leaned into the air, thinking that it was the wall behind me, when in fact it wasn't. But something didn't seem right. Sitting on the concrete floor, I was staring directly at a wrought iron archway. I was pretty sure wasn't there before, labelled platform 9 3/4. Was there such a thing? That's not possible. Is it? Maybe I hit my head on the way down and I'm imagining things. I got up off the floor and looked around for my things. They were nowhere to be found. How strange. They were there only a second ago. I turned around to evaluate my surroundings, when all of a sudden, I realised I was in Wonderland. Next to the platform stood a large steam engine train, red in colouring, and on its black face said the unfamiliar words, Hogwarts Express, and the number 5972. I gaped at the train and its massive beauty and size. I was in complete awe. But the train wasn't what baffled me the most. There was a rush of people, some of them wearing funny clothing and hats. The children and teenagers had trunks and carts at their sides, many with owls and cages and cats in their arms. And they were all carrying wooden sticks. I heard parts of some conversations discussing topics I had never heard of and didn't understand. Yeah, well, Gryffindor may have won the Quidditch House Cup this year, but once we get rid of that bloody Parkinson as captain, Slytherin's gonna take the trophy. Guess what? I passed my apparition test on first try. The Hogwarts castle is so cool, Mum. You should have seen it. The staircases change. Do you think I'll be made prefect for next year? It was all so odd. I half expected a giant rabbit to go running by, wailing, "I'm late, I'm late!" Tea party, anyone? I had to be dreaming. This wasn't real. What's wrong with these people? What are they doing here? What's a Hogwarts? And what the fuck was in that chocolate I ate? I looked around frantically to see if anyone else looked as confused as I felt. I had no idea where I was, or if that means that I thought I had gotten here were even possible. "Are you alright?" a voice said from behind me, startling me out of my panicked thoughts. It belonged to a teenage boy. "You look like a mental case just standing there looking around like that." I spun around to face him and ask him how I could possibly be the mental case here, but my words got caught in my throat. The first thing I noticed about him was his height. He towered over me by about a foot, and I had to crane my neck up to see his face properly. And boy, was I glad that I did. Standing before me was probably one of the best-looking boys I had ever laid my eyes on in my entire life. And he was talking to me. This guy looked about my age, and had raven-coloured hair that stood up in many different directions, creating a "I just rolled out of bed" type look that seriously worked on him. His eyes were brown and bored into mine. I felt as if he could see into my soul. Okay, maybe not, but I definitely felt like he was judging me. What? A girl can't fall through big brick walls and look like a mental case every once in a while? The beautiful boy was obviously amused by my reaction, and patiently waited for me to pick my jaw and dignity off the floor and answer him. But I couldn't think of anything to say that made sense, or was coherent for that matter. After what felt like forever, but was probably just a minute at most, I hope, I finally said something. I fell. Through the wall. I have a way with words, don't I? He raised one eyebrow and pointed to the archway behind me. You mean the barrier? I scratched my head. I guess so. Listen, could you just please tell me what's going on here? I'm so lost. I trailed off as he stared at me, the amusement leaving his eyes, and he seemed to have come to some sort of realization that I didn't quite understand. "What's your name?" he asked finally. Giving strangers my name was another one of my mother's rules, but he seemed harmless enough. Then again, so did that old lady on the train, and all signs seemed to be pointing to the fact that she may have drugged me. But then, if that were true, then that would mean that this was a hallucination. Therefore, I wasn't really giving him my name, was I? None of this was real, right? This is how I rationalised my next move. "Spencer Lockwood." I looked around me before I said my name. Whispered it, actually. I didn't want any of the crazy stick-carrying people to hear me and steal my identity. "Nice to meet you, Spencer. I'm James Potter," he replied, startling me by grabbing my hand. "Would you mind coming with me for a moment?" I stared at him, unsure. He laughed, most likely at my facial expression. "Don't worry, you'll be safe with me." "Okay," I mumbled, before I could stop myself. I should really stop staring into his eyes, I thought. They're enchanting me into agreeing to things that I normally wouldn't. But before I could change my mind or even protest, James was walking, towing me behind him. We were headed towards a family, one that I assumed was his due to the fact that they looked like him. We stopped in front of a man who I assumed was his father, since he looked just like James with the exception of distinct green eyes, glasses, and a funny-looking scar on his forehead, which, if I saw correctly, was in the shape of a lightning bolt. Mum, Dad," James said, looking back at me. His parents stopped their conversations with their two younger kids, looked first at their eldest son, and then their eyes settled on me. "Who's this, James? A friend of yours from school?" His mum smiled at me. She was really pretty, with fiery red hair, and was tall and thin. She hardly looked like she could be the mother of 3. With his free hand, James nervously ran it through his messy hair. I suddenly became very much aware of the fact that he was still holding my hand. His warmth felt nice against my cool fingers. No, actually." He lowered his voice to a whisper, so I couldn't hear, but his words reached my ears anyway. "I found her by the archway. Her name's Spencer. She's a muggle. Said that she fell through the barrier. What do we do?" "What's a muggle?" I blurted out without thinking. My face immediately flushed red as the Potter family turned to me. None of them responded to my question right away. They didn't seem to know what to say. "Nothing you need to worry about," Mr. Potter said kindly after a few moments of awkward silence. "So, what do you think we should do?" James asked his father. I knew he was referring to me when he said that, but I wasn't sure what exactly he meant by it. "Do about what?" I felt like a nosy little kid. They ignored my question and began discussing me as if I wasn't right there. "Well, technically, what we're supposed to do is bring her to the ministry to have her memory erased." "What?" But that's completely out of the question. I can breathe again. Mrs. Potter nodded in accord. "I agree with your father, James, and I'm sure that you do too." He lightly squeezed my hand. "Yeah, I do." James's younger brother, who was almost an exact copy of Mr. Potter, then spoke up. "Maybe she can just promise not to tell anyone, and we can let her be on her way." His sister snorted. I could tell that she was several years younger than me, but she, like the rest of the family, was much taller than me. "Great idea, Al. Your problem skills are astounding." Her tone was dripping with sarcasm. Al glared at the redhead. "Shut up, Lily. I don't hear you coming up with anything better." "All right, you two. That's enough," Mrs. Potter scolded, before Lily could even open her mouth to argue. Mr. Potter put both of his hands on my shoulders and leaned down so that he was at my eye level. "Way to make me feel like I was 9-year-old, Mr. Potter. Way to go." I could feel that James was still holding my hand. My heart pounded heavily at the thought.